What if I told you that the first Europeans weren't white? That the ancient faces of Europe had dark skin, blue eyes, and hair textures that would shock modern stereotypes? Thanks to groundbreaking DNA research, we're unmasking the real look of Europe's earliest people, and the truth is stranger than fiction. Let's travel back in time and decode what ancient Europeans really looked like. For centuries, history books told a simplified tale of Europe's past: castles, conquerors, and crowns. But buried beneath the soil, deep in bones and teeth, lies a far more ancient story, one written in DNA. In the last 2 decades, scientists have begun extracting ancient DNA from the skeletons of prehistoric Europeans, some as old as 45,000 years. This isn't just dusty archaeology. This is genetic time travel. And what we've discovered, it changes everything. The first Homo sapiens to enter Europe, around 45,000 years ago, weren't pale-skinned. In fact, some of them were surprisingly dark. One of the most shocking finds comes from a skeleton discovered in what is now England, nicknamed Cheddar Man. This man lived over 10,000 years ago, and had dark brown skin, blue eyes, and tightly curled black hair. That's right. The oldest known Briton looked nothing like what most people imagine. But Cheddar Man wasn't alone. Across prehistoric Europe, from Spain to Scandinavia, early hunter-gatherers had similar traits. Their skin tones ranged from deep to medium dark, their eyes often blue or green, and their hair textures varied wildly. The genetic mosaic of ancient Europe was far more colorful than the popular myth of a pale, homogeneous past. So where did these features come from? Why were early Europeans so different from modern ones? And how did their DNA get replaced or reshaped? To answer that, we need to rewind to an even earlier chapter, before farming, before cities, before borders. The real face of ancient Europe begins with 3 mysterious tribes, each carrying a genetic legacy that still lives inside you today. To understand what ancient Europeans looked like, we need to travel back tens of thousands of years, before cities, before nations, when Europe was a vast wilderness, inhabited by just a few small, scattered tribes. Modern European DNA is built on the legacy of 3 ancient populations. Think of them as the original architects of Europe's gene pool. Each one arrived at a different time, bringing their own unique features, skills, and genetic signatures. The earliest known group was the Western hunter-gatherers. These were the people behind Cheddar Man and his cousins across Mesolithic Europe. Their DNA reveals something surprising: dark to medium dark skin, blue or green eyes, and straight to curly hair. Yes, blue eyes and dark skin coexisted in Europe for thousands of years. They lived a rugged, nomadic lifestyle, hunting megafauna, fishing in ice-cold rivers, and making tools from stone and bone. But genetically, they were unlike any Europeans alive today. The early European farmers then came a dramatic shift. Around 9,000 years ago, a new wave of people arrived from what is now Turkey and the Middle East. They brought something radical: farming. These were the early European farmers, and they changed everything. Unlike the hunter-gatherers, they had lighter skin, brown eyes, and often dark straight hair. They introduced agriculture, domesticated animals, pottery, and a whole new way of life. As they moved westward, they interbred with the local hunter-gatherers, mixing their genes and their features. This mixing explains why ancient DNA from Neolithic Europe shows a weird blend: light skin, but still blue eyes, or dark hair with pale complexions. The gene pool was getting richer and more unpredictable. The Yamnaya steppe nomads, but the final piece of the puzzle came with fire, horses, and possibly the invention of the wheel. Around 5,000 years ago, a powerful tribe rode into Europe from the vast grasslands of what is now southern Russia and Ukraine. These were the Yamnaya. Tall, muscular, and warlike, the Yamnaya brought with them light skin, light eyes, and a new Indo-European language family, which would later evolve into Latin, Greek, Celtic, and even English. They also carried a significant amount of the gene linked to lactose tolerance, allowing people to digest milk into adulthood, something rare before this. The Yamnaya didn't just bring genes. They dominated. Within a few hundred years, their DNA replaced up to 90% of the local gene pool in parts of northern and western Europe. These 3 ancient tribes, hunter-gatherers, farmers, and steppe nomads, merged, over millennia, into what we now call European. And yet, traces of each one still live inside many of us today. When we think of ancient Europeans, most people picture pale-skinned figures roaming misty forests. But here's the shocker. Light skin didn't become common in Europe until surprisingly late, and the reason why is deeper than you think. The early Europeans were not white. The earliest Homo sapiens in Europe, hunter-gatherers like Cheddar Man, had dark brown to black skin. Their DNA shows no trace of the key mutations that allow for pale skin. In fact, genes for light skin didn't even exist in them. Let that sink in. For most of human history in Europe, whiteness didn't exist. Even as late as 7,000 years ago, the majority of Europeans still had medium to dark skin, despite already having blue eyes or other, European, features. The puzzle wasn't about appearance, it was about biology and survival. Why did pale skin evolve? So, what changed? The answer lies in sunlight, or rather, the lack of it. Europe receives much less UV radiation than Africa or South Asia. And humans need UV light to produce vitamin D, crucial for healthy bones and immune function. Darker skin blocks UV light, great in the tropics, but a problem in cloudy, northern climates. As people moved north and settled, they faced a challenge: how to survive without enough vitamin D. Over generations, mutations favoring lighter skin began to spread. These changes allowed more UV to penetrate the skin and help the body make more vitamin D. It was evolution's response to the European environment. When did pale skin actually become dominant? Genetic data shows that two major skin lightening genes, SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, became common only in the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. And guess who brought them? The early farmers and the Yamnaya nomads. As these two groups migrated into Europe, they introduced the genes for pale skin, and over time, these genes became dominant, especially in northern regions where vitamin D was hardest to get. By around 3,000 years ago, most Europeans had the light skin we associate with the continent today. But evolution wasn't uniform. Some southern Europeans retained darker tones longer. Even today, the genetic legacy of ancient diversity still echoes in Mediterranean populations. And here's where the science destroys the myth. Skin color is just a tiny piece of the genetic puzzle. Two people with similar skin tones can have radically different ancestry. And two people with very different appearances can be close genetic cousins. The truth is, white, as a racial category, is a modern invention. The ancient world didn't think in those terms, and DNA proves it. The faces of ancient Europe were diverse, mixed, and constantly evolving. So the next time someone says Europe was always white, remember, science tells a different story. And the real story? It's far more fascinating. Facial reconstructions, rebuilding the faces of prehistoric Europeans. We've seen the DNA. We've followed the migrations. But what did these ancient Europeans actually look like, face to face? Thanks to a mix of forensic science, anthropology, and high-resolution 3D modeling, we're now able to gaze directly into the eyes of people who lived thousands of years ago. And the faces we find are nothing like the ones in your textbooks. Cheddar Man, the first Briton, 10,000 years ago. Let's start with the most famous, Cheddar Man, discovered in a cave in Somerset, England. DNA revealed he had dark brown to black skin, blue eyes, and curly hair, a combination almost never seen today in the UK, but perfectly normal 10,000 years ago. His reconstruction shocked the world, and sparked a global conversation about race, identity, and forgotten history. The Villabruna Man, Ice Age Italy, 14,000 years ago. Next, Villabruna Man, unearthed in northern Italy. He belonged to the Western hunter-gatherers, and his features? Olive-toned skin, light eyes, and straight dark hair. His face was soft but rugged, part Mediterranean, part Northern European, yet belonging fully to neither. Through his features, we see a bridge between worlds, between Ice Age nomads and the birth of modern Europe. Luzia woman, Brazil's surprise link to Europe? Optional note: this could be trimmed for focus if sticking to Europe only, while not European. Her skull shape bears uncanny resemblance to Upper Paleolithic Europeans, raising questions about early global migrations and the forgotten complexity of ancient populations. The past was more connected than we thought. Yamnaya warrior, Steppe invader, 5,000 years ago. Now meet a Yamnaya warrior, tall, broad-shouldered, with pale skin, light eyes, and a serious gaze. These weren't just farmers or herders, they were the movers and shapers of Europe's future. Their DNA dominates much of northern and eastern Europe today. And it shows in the cheekbones, the jawlines, the very structure of modern faces. One by one, we see the story take shape. The wide eyes of a blue-eyed hunter. The gentle features of a Neolithic woman. The stern jaw of a Yamnaya chief. All these people, strangers to each other, yet their blood flows in modern Europe today. The truth in their eyes, these reconstructions aren't just faces. They're time capsules. They show us that the ancient world wasn't black and white. It was a swirling, evolving mosaic of skin tones, eye colors, and facial forms. Forget the myths. Europe's ancestors weren't frozen in time, they were dynamic, diverse, and in constant motion. And now, with each new DNA discovery, we're not rewriting history, we're finally reading it for the first time. If this journey through time blew your mind, imagine what else we'll uncover in the next episode. Subscribe to help us decode the human story, piece by piece. Leave a comment. Which ancient face surprised you the most? Would you have guessed Cheddar Man had blue eyes and dark skin? And as always, share this with someone who still thinks ancient Europe was all one shade. Until next time, keep asking questions, and keep decoding history.